Now it's my time, not only moderating, now I can also show something. So I would like to give you an introduction into this UI5 Evolution project. Beforehand, Frederick and Stefan, they already talked a bit about that. They already showed a bit about this project Cheetah, what we did in Q3 last year. Sorry, in Q3 last year. And this project was some kind of an investigation into that, what would be possible to be done with that what we have with UI5. And out of that project, we invented, or we decided to go into making this part of our code base, and we started this UI5 Evolution project. So UI5 Evolution project is the successor of this project Cheetah, and it should be the innovation project of UI5. Why do we do evolution? This is something you might ask you. So we benefit long time now from that what happened. So we did lots of features for our SAP environment, and but really innovating our framework, this did not take place very well. And for that, we decided to go into that direction and invest into this UI5 Evolution, especially to become the enterprise-grade UI technology of choice for SAP. This is for us important for sure, but also beyond. This is interesting for you as a community. So with that, I would like to visualize a bit why we do all that. So qualities of that, what we have. So today's situation is a bit like that. I took this from my son yesterday. It's a bit like these Duplo blocks. Everything is hardly connected with UI5. So you cannot decide which parts you want to choose. And this is exactly what we want to change. We want to make all the pieces individually and loosely coupled. So it's maybe a bit bad to put it all there, okay? But this is not like a hard connection of all this stuff anymore. And you could more or less decide which individual pieces you want to use from the framework, and not like today to take this big monolithic block. So this is one of the quality what we drive, modularization. I will explain this later in a bit more detail. Another topic what we will do is for sure investing into the performance, and also my son yesterday had a nice idea to visualize this. You know, you can build easily a chat with these Duplo blocks. This should visualize the performance what we have, and you can see that we don't need all the pieces of these Duplo blocks for that. We can decide which pieces of UI5 Evolution we take for that, and with that we can build up on top then a very performant application. Another topic, what we would like to do is to get more trends into our code base. Yeah, we look a little bit maybe old school today with that what we have, especially jQuery SAP declare and require for this module syntax if you still use them and not already migrated to this modern UI5 AMD syntax and stuff like that. But it should be easily possible in future to also adopt a bit more these trends which are available out there. And if you have standards and you have lightweight frameworks, you can easily adopt things to these standards and connect them. And this is what we want to achieve, to benefit from trends being available out there. And surrounded by that, it means we want to focus on openness. Openness to allow to bring the pieces together, to allow to connect all the individual pieces. It's also about making things available in future. For sure, you might ask yourself right now, yes, why don't this guy publish this already, what we have done? Yeah, there's a good question behind that, and there is one critical thing what we have. This is the topic about compatibility. So everything what we will do with evolution will happen in a compatible way. This means that we will allow existing code bases to benefit from that evolutionary aspect, and they get also that they at the end can reuse that what we do under the hood. And for that we need to have a solid state foundation before we can maybe provide this to the outside. And once we are at that stage, for sure, we will make this also available. Okay. We identified focus areas for the UI5 Evolution project. So focus areas are, on the one hand side, the modular core. This is the foundation of the whole story. We have a topic called rendering and controls, the programming model layer, and on the left-hand side, which will get more and more attraction, we will have that build tooling layer available. So this build tooling layer, this will strive across all the layers because it is really important. It will be a beneficial thing in the whole story to improve, for example, the performance as we want to shift things from the runtime to the design time or to the build time. Okay, let's get started and look into this modular core. So the modular core, this is establishing a future-proof foundation. So if you want to innovate in future, we need to have a foundation where we can build up things on top. And this foundation should be really safe in a way how you can organize your codes and how you do your dependency management. It's important in future that we have a clear dependency management for all of these modules which are part of UI5 and not like today where they can refer to global things. We also want to enable with that foundation the possibility for applications to build just this application with the amount of resources being needed. So, and what does it mean in detail? So I picked some of the individual topics here. And there is one topic which is quite obvious. So in the W3C, it's already announced that for a long time already, that the synchronous XHRs in the main thread, they are deprecated. And we rely heavily in our framework still today on the synchronous XHRs if we load modules afterwards. And we overcome this with bundling for sure, but we want to make this something which is history. So the removal of synchronous XHRs is one of the clear goals of that, and this will take place. And for sure, for compatibility reasons, there will be such a layer in between where you can still use these synchronous XHRs as long as they are supported by the browsers. But once the browsers stop it, we also won't support it anymore. That's why it's also important to migrate to these UI5 AMD modules. Another thing is about getting independent from DOM and jQuery. So the lower layers of the framework as of today, they rely heavily on jQuery and they rely heavily on DOM operations. And this brings me also to the next topic immediately because they are something which we want to see combined. We have a universal core in mind, which we can reuse on the browser side on the one hand side and for sure in addition at build time. This has a clear opportunity that you can do things like XML templating preprocessing not only in the client side anymore and need to cache it somewhere. You can do that already at build time if you have static data and stuff like this. And this is what is one of the things what we have in mind with getting rid of these DOM and jQuery dependencies for the fundamental pieces. Other things for that which are important are configuration options. So we need to have environmental information which can be provided for the framework to decide what kind of modules to be used. And this is something what we also need to establish here, that we have environmental information coming for Node or for the browser, and depending on that, we load then the specific modules which are required for them. And one of the key aspects as well is this modular architecture. It's also the name of this focus area of this modular core. It's to get rid of the globals. This is one of the things which look quite nice in the history, that you can just refer to a sub-M button without loading it or without specifying the dependency explicitly. But in future, what we want to get is that everyone who uses a UI5 control or uses a module, he should define the dependency to the module. This is important, this dependency to the modules, because with that we can build up tools on top which know which kind of modules are needed for the application, and we can create then these specific packages. And really also a thing which is something also from my heart, what I would see in future is that we embrace also emerging technologies. We should look into that, what happens around, and think how to leverage and to negotiate technologies, how to bring them in and to make UI5 also a bit more attractive and closer to the standards out there. And this is also a thing which we have in mind. So for today we say, when we do some rework, we define, for example, UI5 AMD modules for that. And I will also show that in a second, what it means. But for the future, we keep us open to also switch to, for example, the ES6 modules as they are emerging, they are coming. The browsers, they get support natively inside, and we also want to support this. There is a question in the room, but
ES6 surely is great, but what about IE11, which is supported by Microsoft until 2025?
it's as I said, so it's about having the opportunity to go in that direction. For us as UI5, it's important that we support our foundation here, the browsers which are supported. As long as we support the IE11, we will also have opportunities for them. And that's why I say, so the framework of UI5, this core, this foundation, this will stay today in the way that it's also working on IE11 or on also for the other browsers. So we don't do that, but we want to have the opportunity, once the browser supported, that we also go in that direction, or to achieve something on top that you, as a consumer of the framework, can on top use ES6 modules or more or less things like TypeScript or stuff like that in the application layer. But there you have a better understanding what is your environment. Then we provide a foundation for a wider set of environment here. So let me show what we are doing here. So I go into my console and open the Visual Studio Code and move it to the left. Okay. So this is the UI5 feature branch. It's part of the Open UI5 repository. We did a fork of that. And we try to change a bit the module structures in that. So you might know in the UI5 that in the core we have these jQuery SAP plugins. So these things where we thought in the beginning it would be great if we have jQuery in our library, that we also participate in jQuery and provide plugins. And what we did here is that we achieved them in a compatible way, that we now define modules providing these functions, and before everything was inside. And now for compatibility reasons, we extracted all these individual functionalities like encode HTML, and so we see a bug here. It's encode XML for encode HTML. So we need to address that for sure. I didn't notice this yesterday. But okay, on the other hand side, we all extract these functionalities in the individual AMD modules. And you also see at the moment they are typical AMD modules you can also load with require.js. And they consist of individual functions. Having individual functions in those modules at compile time or at design time makes sense, because you can really decide on a module level individually what kind of functionality you need, and not having the whole bunch of this jQuery SAP modules which provides lots of unnecessary code. Okay. Back to the slides. So with that, I'm finished with the modular core topic. So I explained a bit of the pieces what we are doing here. Another important section now of that what we look into is the build tooling. As said, the build tooling becomes really one of a major thing of the developer's life, internally, externally. And what we want to do now with our new build tooling is to provide an open source Node.js-based build and development environment to support you as application developers or you as a framework developer, and also for us internally as framework developers. So in that area, we have a topic called agnostic build modules. We had some experiences, quite some time, that we want to make us a bit more independent from technologies here, like task runners like Grunt or Gulp or anything else, because the next day some new pig is running around and You have to follow the next trend. But our logic, what we have in our build modules, like theme builds, like preload build, and so on, they are everywhere the same. And what we want to do is to bring that in a format that we can reuse them and plug them into the individual task runners. This is really something what we have in mind with these agnostic build modules and what we do. And also, one thing is that these build modules and also Node.js-based build, it will replace our in-house Maven-based build, which unfortunately didn't make it out there in the past. Another thing is the command line interface. So all of these new applications, frameworks, let's call it frameworks, they have a command line interface for the most standard use cases. And a similar thing is also what we would like to provide from UI5 side, that you have a command line interface which can assist you during your build, your daily build and development tasks, to run your application, to build the application, and so on. And this should be also really important piece, and it will reuse at the end a standard set of these agnostic build modules what we provide. A new thing which wasn't available till now is self-contained builds. So with the new build tooling, it should be possible when you run a build on your application that you get a custom bundle for this application which contains all the JavaScripts being needed immediately for the initial run. And this is what we also want to do, and that's why it's so important that everyone in future changes his applications to do this explicit dependency management as we would introduce with the Modular Core. And once this is done, you can have these custom bundles. We will also support you when you have to migrate your application. So these migration tools will assist you. They will convert these jQuery SAP declare require modules and bring them in this new AMD format. We use this already internally for our framework to convert pieces. In addition, it will also assist you in getting rid of the globals. So everywhere where you had this sub-M button or so used in your code and you had to have now an AMD module at hand, it will help you to add this as a dependency to this AMD module and to use a local variable therefore. Really an import to clean up and this code which is a bit unstructured than before for that dependencies. And another opportunity what we would like to have in mind is advanced packaging concepts. So at runtime, to create individual bundles, delta packages. So if you are thinking about these FLP scenarios where you run applications and they will be just loaded in addition, there is also always an overlap of modules being needed by these applications. And in order to achieve a highly optimized loading, we would like to have this advanced packaging in future for us as a possibility to do that. And for that, we need to consider this in our build tooling to also build delta packages. So, and with that, this can be also maybe plugged into the runtime. And last but not least, the complete tool chain of that what we have should be enhanced. This means about really helping in the complete app lifecycle, building apps, maybe providing something for Yeoman to create a scaffolding or a skeleton for the application which you can use, which you can get started from. And also this complete tool chain with the CLI tools helping you to get a dev server running if you do library development and so on. We want to use also the things you know from out there with watching and reloading of resources. If you change something, it should reload. It should also maybe execute tests and stuff like this. This is something this build tooling will also take care of, hopefully, or this tool chain what we will compile there. It's not everything developed by us. It's also about using things from out there. This is also really important to say. So a demo. In a demo, I want to show you the difference between the preload application and the packaging, the custom build. So I have here an application. I already built that. So in order to build that, for example, I can showcase this short to you with the command line interface. Let's go there. I have the UI5 command line interface, and this UI5 command line interface has some operations, and for example, like this build or this serve operation. Serve means testing, and build is then executing really a preload build of the application, and it can also do a custom build of the application. And it's using also existing standard tools like Uglify.js to do the minification of the code, but we plug in also our pieces like the preload bundling and the theme building and stuff like that, but not in this case theme building as it's an application. But I already pre-built these applications, and I have 2 of them, and I start a server. So we have on the one hand side the port 5000, which is the preload, and we start the other server, which is the 5001. And now let's take it to the other screen. So this is now our preload. You see that? We have these preload modules for the libraries, and we see we have at the end 13 requests going out. Okay, I can also use the hover, but I think it's better to read it. You have to look into the footer. And there is 1.5 megabyte which has been transferred, and we ignore now the loading times, but keep this 1.5 megabyte in mind, because now we do the same with a preload, with a custom bundle. So you see there is 1 request less because we don't load the preloads anymore of the libraries. But we have a custom bundle for that. And the total amount of content which is being loaded is now 500K. So this means only with that custom build we can reduce the amount of content being loaded by 1/3. And this is important for performance. If you want to reduce performance or improve the performance on an Android device, it's about really reducing the amount of JavaScript being loaded. Okay. Back to the slides. So this was build tooling. The next thing is about rendering and controls. So for rendering and controls, we would like to have a decoupling of our rendering and controls layer from that what we have with our programming model. And this is, if you think about that, what I visualized in the beginning a bit with this modularization. It's really like that we want to make this controls and rendering layer, which is one of the important aspects of that what you use from UI5, because you maybe want to benefit from our controls, which are really highly, I don't find the word in English. But for these controls, it's really something, this could be reused also for other things. Like other programming models, and we want to make them therefore individually usable, but also I have this noun here, this verb here, universally usable. Universal means with that that it can be also used on a server side, and this is also, as said, something, or in a Node.js environment, and this is also something which is pretty important for us. We want to shift things from the client to the build time, and therefore we always need these universal JavaScript pieces which allow us to move code from the client to the server side or to the JavaScript server side. But first of all, let me explain the whole story, and then I can showcase this also a bit, not the universal part, but explain it a bit. One thing what we will do is we want to extract the renderers from our programming model. This means that we want to have static renders. They are of today like that. They are static already. You could extract that. But the interface for the renderers, they will get a reference to the UI5 control. And this UI5 control is a programming model object. And with that, you have then also a coupling of these renderers to the client side. And this is one thing we want to get rid of. Also, things like DOM interaction, which is today a bit unclear who does it. Is it the behavior who does it? Is it the renderer who does it? Is it the render manager at the end who injects the HTML? This we also want to clean up and to streamline it a bit, that only the renderer at the end has the task to talk and to update the DOM. We also want to introduce a new render syntax, a declarative render syntax for our controls, which would allow us to get a bit more understanding of that what is written as a renderer. Today it's JavaScript, you combine strings. In future it will be markup centric, it's a handlebars based syntax, we decided at the moment for that. And this I will show in a second how this looks like. And it also, with this declarative syntax, will allow us to easily build tools on top how to reuse or how to optimize these renderers. This brings me to my next topic with the simplification of composition. So in future, it should be possible to combine controls or the renderers of controls without the overhead of a managed object. So this is one thing which is expensive today. If you combine controls, if you ever have written a composite control, you have to write lots of glue code in between. You have to have the controls nested in between. And this is tough work, and you have to take care about lifecycle, cleanup, and all that stuff. And with that, with the simplification of the composition, we want to make this much more simpler and also have the opportunity at build time to combine these renderers as they look like a single renderer at the end. So we will melt the overhead of individual controls. To prove everything that it works fine, we want to do a side-by-side integration. So we want to renovate, and this is evolution of UI5. So we renovate few of the controls, and they should coexist next to the old renderers to still keep the old applications running or the old controls running. And this will also help us to do some investigation, some analysis, whether the performance is good or not. And with that, we decided at the end, or will decide whether we rework them. But I think what will be a statement is that we will rework our bread and butter controls with our new rendering concepts in future, but we will not renovate, like, for example, the old thing inspector, which is not even more supported. And it still can be used for sure, but it's no must to improve that. And one other thing, at the end we will also do an agnostic proof. We want to showcase maybe that our renderers, they could be used, for example, together with the React or with the Angular. So this would be cool at the end as a story to make our rendering assets also available for others without the overhead of a programming model like you have it today. If you want to do a wrapping of our buttons, of our controls in Angular, you would have to pull the complete framework. And this is something we would like to change also for our possibilities in the future to allow for us renovation on top. So let's go to the demo for that. So this is here also a fork of the repository, of the OpenUI5 repository. I used the cron serve on that. Before that, I opened the code editor to show it to you. So what has been done here, this is one of the first POCs what we have done to write a handlebars-based renderer for the button control. And this is how it looks like. This is now pretty complicated. I have an easy one which showcases a bit more how it could look like for simple controls. So you write your control markup-centric in future. And you mix in dedicated standard things like control data. That's what you have today by calling functions. It's not final. So this is all work in progress, we have to say. And it visualizes a bit what we have in mind. So what will happen here is that the control, it will create by the framework such a context, a templating context, and it will inject that context in that renderer. And the renderer at the end creates the markup, and this markup is then used by the render manager to inject it into the application. And you can have both. You can have the classical button renderer then for testing purposes still next to it. And you can have a new declarative handlebars-based renderers also side by side. And how does this look like now? If I find my browser and I execute cron serve. No, I didn't do that. So let me go there, cron serve, to start our testing environment. So this is not yet using the UI5 CLI here. This is the button test page. And what you see here is all these buttons. And we have here a URL parameter for now. The sub, do you see that well? It's a SAP minus UI minus Evo. And we can disable and enable it. Look at the prefix UI5con. This will get removed once I fall back to the standard renderer. Now the JavaScript-based renderer is used. And if I enable the Evo, then I use the handlebars renderer. And to show that this is really real, I can also modify that. I just put a hello in front as well. And I refresh. And then the button gets immediately updated. This is also what we would like to see in future. Everything you change, this is one of the fundamental principles for build tooling. It should be reflectable immediately for the developers to see that on the client side. Okay, and there should be also one thing. This is more or less a design time feature. We will really also invest in tooling to compile this JavaScript or these handlebars templates into JavaScript, that there is no additional overhead on the client side to parse and to run these templates. Okay, coming back to the slides. Okay. Do I need to remove that? Yeah, good. So having finished the rendering and controls, we move on to the last topic, which is, I think, one of the most open topics of that UI5 Evolution project. It's a topic about programming models. As we said, or as I said, we want to continue the support for the existing programming model of UI5, but we also want to support with trends. So it should be possible to reuse parts of the UI5 framework also with trends out there, and you should be also able to use TypeScript on top and stuff like that. We will look into that. It's really a feedback we got quite often, and we will listen to that, but we have to see how we can do that. And maybe also you as a community can support us in that direction. Some of you already did. There are some experience around. But with UI5 Classic, as I said, this programming model will stay, and we will support it without any modifications we expect from that UI5 Classic programming model. And, but they only will partially benefit then of the things what we are doing. So if you want to fully benefit of that, you have to go and migrate applications. So you use the UI5 Classic, I say migrate it here, because it's not a change of the programming model, it's more or less a change that you define your dependencies properly, that you get rid of your global stuff, how you refer to things, and that you apply to the best practices and patterns what we would expect from the framework, from the application at the end to be done. And there is one thing what we had played around with in the Cheetah project. We did this what you have seen in this video, what Stefan showed with this 1.2 seconds. This was a reactive application, so we built our own reactive applications, and we looked into these reactive patterns. And these reactive patterns seem to be quite interesting, because it makes the understanding of the application much more simple than today. You have this unidirectional data flow and stuff like that, in that not the two-way data binding like we have in the UI5. And it also helps to make the performance of the application better, because without having that complex logic in between, it's less code to be executed. And this is something what we also would like to keep in mind, and what we also would like to keep open for us to invest in that direction, that, for example, for mobile scenarios, we would have a reactive programming model at hand, and maybe this could also become one of the standard programming models in the future. But this is something, this is not yet decided. It's an optional topic. And last but not least, here on that slide, as I said multiple times today, reuse of individual layers should be possible for several technologies. As I said, this is also a personal wish of me. I have to emphasize this. It should be possible to use the rendering also with a React or with a Angular. We should not limit on that, and we should do that in the best possible way, that they don't have an overhead from including the UI5, and that they only use that what they really want to and need. Maybe to have one showcase as a final thing to see that compatibility, I have one application. This is running a Maven-based environment now, and unfortunately I didn't do that yet, so maybe it will not work and I have to do it. So be patient, it will start in a second. So this is the application which now been started. It's a Fiori Elements application, so using OData v4. And this application, I want to show to you that it's really working on top of this new evolution foundation. And it just, there was no need to adopt it. This was really, and it should be one of the key message, that it takes a bit because there is the development environment and it's compiling less and stuff like that. But once it's there, you should see that the application is running. So it comes up now. It's a bit slow the first time. But you see all these new modules are in this Now.js, so these AMD modules where we expose one function. So you can trust me, this is really the new evolution foundation under the hood of a Fiori Elements and up-to-date Fiori Elements application. And we didn't need to do anything. Besides that we have to do that compatibility stuff in our framework. Okay, with that, I'm done with the programming models. And with that, I'm also done with my presentation. I would say let's evolve. And hopefully soon we can also make this a bit more public. We will have to still do some homework to get that done in a compatible way. And once we have this solid foundation, we will also be able to push this out and to make this part, hopefully, of one of the next maintenance releases. 152 is coming up next year, and this should be also our target goal when we would see first things of that what we have here in our real code foundation. Thank you.